Tonight, on these streets in the heart of Brooklyn, New York, the Bobov Hasidic Community has come together in celebration.
Their spiritual leader, their Rebbe, has lived to see the wedding of his great-granddaughter. When Hasidic survivors arrived in this country after World War II, America opened its doors to them.
Like most immigrants before them, it was taken for granted they would soon lose their Eastern European ways.
However, Hasidim refused to follow this script.
I noticed that the women always wear wigs and they wear long dresses. I noticed that.
It seems that they do have close families. They're very family oriented, it seems.
Then I'm always struck by how many children the women are having.
Not a chassid because I'm a woman, and I believe in egalitarianism.
They squeeze George Washington real tight. They really do. They good. I need somebody like that to save money for me.
They smell, they don't know how to dress, they all dress the same, they're ugly, they're mean, they push.
The kids do have respect in their own community amongst their own people. When they go outside of that, they don't have respect. That's the way they are, with a goy, whatever they say.
Hasidim are a minority within a minority. They arouse controversy among other Jews, no less than among Gentiles. Who are the Hasidim? Why have they stubbornly refused to join America's mainstream?
Hasidim don't consider themselves American or Polish or anything else. They are living in America as they are living in Poland. They don't, for that matter, consider themselves Israelis. Their prime identity, to use Hasidic parlance, is Avodas HaBoire, which means the worship of the Lord.
Hasidim reject many things Americans take for granted. Television, movies, sports, pop music. Men and women are separated by distinct roles in many aspects of daily life. They don't send their kids to public schools or universities. Instead, Hasidim teach their children to live according to the Torah, the teachings contained in the 5 books of Moses.
The Hasidim came to America primarily in the 50s, at a time when the common wisdom was that you pretty much lost your particularistic cultural attributes after a brief period in America, which is what had happened to other Jewish immigrations.
Rich or poor, old or young, the Jews came to this land for the same reasons as the Swedes, the Irishmen, and the Italians, to fulfill a simple human dream, to live in freedom, peace, and prosperity, to work and to rear their children. The Jew, too, has blended into the American landscape. He is part of the music, the catchwords of his country and his century.
Merry Christmas, Paul. Happy Hanukkah, Jerry.
And the Hasidim didn't do that. They maintained their old-style Eastern European approach. And the fascinating question is, why did they succeed? How did they succeed? And I think there are two factors here. One was the tremendous strength of the Hasidic leaders that came over at that time, who said, darn it, we are going to recreate our societies here in America. And we don't care how funny it looks or how bizarre or how many people laugh at us or how difficult it's going to be in any way. We are going to recreate it right here in America.
Sag mal, Bruch, ich komme erst mal von Amerika. Ist gegangen auf der Gas, mit der Strahm und Kaften Freitag. Hat sich umgerufen dort ein Amerikaner hier, das ich kann verlangen, als die europäische Jiden kommen schon rüber, wir kommen Strahm und Kaften, mit 30 darin, also das. Gibt oi, hat Moira, der Rebbe mit Kalium nach Amerika. Der Rebbe hat noch nicht Kalium gemacht Amerika, aber ich will es Kalium machen.
Once, the story goes, the Torah scroll wouldn't fit into its new cover. Someone suggested they cut the Torah down to size. Ridiculous? Of course. It's the cover that must be altered. The Rebbes said, we will not modify the Torah to fit America. We will tailor America to fit the Torah.
I teach in a modern Orthodox high school. The modern Orthodox are vastly different than the Hasidim in that they live culturally in America. And I think I would become disheartened if it wouldn't be for the tremendous sustenance that Hasidic books and Rebbes and stories and teachings gives me. I don't think I have the strength to confront the victims of shopping mall America.
Oh, way to go, Will. Way to go, way to go, way to go, way to go.
I was born into a fairly typical Brooklyn 1950s Jewish milieu, which was vaguely culturally Jewish, but not religious in any sense of the term. We were Democrats politically and rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers and celebrated Hanukkah and Pesach, and that was the extent of our Jewishness.
Sam, why don't you put the Hanukkah candles in the menorah for tonight?
I was just going to do that.
Susan, would you please help me in the kitchen?
Okay, Mom.
During my childhood, meaning haunted me. That there is something more to life than just a bourgeois pursuit of security. And finally, when my parents moved from Queens to Rockland County, and we lived in very close proximity to the Orthodox community of Muncie.
He walked over to New Square one day when he was 12 years old. It was before his bar mitzvah. He went with two friends of his. They walked into New Square.
We came back to public school the next day, and the whole class knew of our trip. And they're all crowding around. They're saying, what happened? What happened in New Square? What went on there in New Square? And my friend Paul was relating the story. And he got to that point where he says, the door opened and the Rebbe came out. And one of the girls yells out, she says, well, what did he look like? What did he look like? And Paul just paused and he said, he looked like Moses coming down from the mountain.
He explained to me exactly how he felt and how he wanted to live his life. And when I realized that this was what he wanted, I accepted it. I, however, did tell him that if this is the way you choose to live your life, please don't try to influence Jay, who is my youngest son.
The previous Skvera Rebbe left a profound impression upon me. He was this saint who, when he would pray or study or whatever, you got a sense that he was elsewhere. And yet he could turn around the next minute and speak to somebody whose business had failed or whose wife couldn't conceive or any number of problems, and was willing to bring himself down to the lowest of levels to communicate with any human being. So that, to me, was basically what I had been looking for.
Well, good health.
Skver, Bobot, Satmar, Belz, Lubavitch. Even in America, Hasidim have kept the names of their towns and villages. They refuse to let the story of these places and those who lived in them fade from memory.
I can't believe that it's 50 years since we were liberated, and I say it's unbelievable how time flies.
Why was I the lucky one to live through and to see this? And my parents didn't see that. I told a German I'll give him everything that I have to, I'll give him one. Give him one arm, one leg, one eye, to let him live. It didn't help, nothing. And you can understand how I feel by living through and raising 2-3 generations already that I see. And I hope to God to see more of them in good health with my wife for many, many years.
I was blessed that I am alive and I can see this. Maybe I did something good in my life. Maybe.
Hasidic survival depends upon each generation transmitting its story to the next. Today, Hani and Beryl's newborn son will be circumcised. Hani's mother looks on as her grandchild is given a Hebrew name, a name which will link the child to the generations which preceded it.
We named our new baby Shalom for my grandfather who passed away this year. When he came to America, he was sent by the previous Lubavitch Rebbe to start the school here.
He should just be able to live up to his name. He's stubborn. You have to be stubborn, man. You have to be stubborn to be able to do things. He's going to be a great man.
Benzi! Go get to dir. Benzi an! Küssi macht's. Bist du auf dem Schammes, dem Schammes. Wasi. Allah Nisim, beyond the blue eyes.
The impact that my father had on me is still, even after the Holocaust, he still stayed a religious Hasidic Jew. There is a connection from father to grandfather, great-grandfather, great-grandfather, going to the past. We sing an old song from 150, 200 years old. It's emotional and it's holy and it's beyond words.
Hasidim believe that God can be encountered within us and in all that is around us. The ultimate goal of the true Hasid, like the goal of all mystics, is to lose oneself in a transcendent state of cleaving to God, a state Hasidim call Dveikus.
Hasidism started as a spiritual revival movement, which emphasized prayer, joy, and charity. The founder of Hasidism, the Baal Shem Tov, lived from 1700 to 1760. He was a man of the people who made spirituality accessible to everyone.
Scholarship was always considered as the avenue and the road to God. And in a way it excluded many people who lived in the countryside, who did not have an education. And here comes a man who changed, not that he changed the values, but sort of the scale. He changed the scale of the values. Instead, scholarship being number one, it was based more on a relationship between man and man, between man and God.
The Baal Shem Tov also rejected asceticism. He said everyday life could be sanctified, that God could be served through everything one did. Eating, working, raising children, even sex could become a spiritual act. The Baal Shem Tov taught that sadness creates a barrier between man and God, while gladness and joy open the gates of heaven.
Before the Hasidic movement came, Jewish religion was taught like a stick. You must do this. If not, God is going to punish you. The holy Baal Shem saw that a lot of Jews are leaving the religion because of this type of strictness. He taught us that you could do it with a galet, with a pat. Just the opposite.
Hasidism spread its teachings through storytelling, a means which everyone could understand.
It is Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. The Baal Shem Tov stops abruptly in the middle of a prayer. Time passes, and the congregation becomes uncomfortable. An illiterate young shepherd yearning to reach out to God pulls out his flute and plays a single heartfelt note. The congregants are stunned by this breach of decorum. Suddenly, the Baal Shem Tov resumes praying. Afterwards, he explains, I sensed the gates of heaven were closed to our prayers. That pure note sounded by the shepherd boy pierced through the heavenly gates. And only then were our prayers permitted to follow.
After the Baal Shem Tov's death, his disciples dispersed throughout Eastern Europe to spread their master's wisdom, stories, and parables. The emerging Hasidic movement was accused of heresy and was excommunicated by the recognized leader of Rabbinic Judaism, the Gaon of Vilna. The ban read, in part, everywhere they should be torn up by the roots. They should be scattered and driven far apart, so that not two of them should remain together. Despite the ban, Hasidism became the dominant form of Judaism in much of Eastern Europe. The movement was led by charismatic teachers known as Rebbes.
When a Chassid looks at his Rebbe, he sees the embodiment of the community. The Rebbe is the king, the collective representation, the flag. He's everything rolled up in one.
Every Chassid looks upon him as his own father, as his grandparents. You see a lot of times pushing, shoving it. You want to listen to him. We're like one. And he teaches the past and the Torah and most often the songs he makes, and he teaches us the songs and we sing. It's like everything that he does, we're crazy of it.
I do feel more lucky than someone else who may not be a chassid, and the reason for that is that we have a Rebbe. We have someone that we always look to and look up to. And everything in our life is based on what the Rebbe tells us to do. We don't take any major minded decision on our own without asking the Rebbe. And we know that the Rebbe cares for us, we know that the Rebbe loves us, and we know, of course, the wisdom of the Rebbe.
A Rebbe, hat auch a Rebbe. Jetzt weiß wer mein Rebbe ist? Der Gere. Alle Kinder sind sehr happy, als sie kennen sein der Rebbe? Ja! Ich will sagen, sehr, sehr erscheinen, Leute. Ich bin der Größte der Gerets, okay?
Ze eerlijk darf wissen, dass auf vielen geht. Man darf holen, man darf sagen wie Jakiv. So der Seides, der Tatas. Der Reib bestellt uns als Messias, als es geht. Dann mit Bagdad.
Wer hat gesehen der Rebbe? Wer hat gehört der Rebbe? Kannst du sagen ein Wort, wo du es gehört von der Rebbe?
The feeling at that age basically left with is the fatherly look. He likes us, he cares for us.
Wieso hat, als mit gehad, als größte Gast du, ist wenn wir davenen, hat man davenen, als besser wie allemal noch, ja? Ja. Jetzt gedenke von lange Jahren, als du in Jagel Teure, hat jetzt gehad das Schier zu sehen, der Gere.
Hasidim believe that their Rebbe is in a constant state of dveikus, of closeness to God. For many Hasidim, such an elevated state is rarely, if ever, attained. But by being in the Rebbe's presence, each Hasid can also experience some of that dveikus. The bond between Hasidim and their Rebbe continues even after his death. Hasidim pray at their Rebbe's grave. They leave handwritten notes asking the Rebbe to intercede in heaven on their behalf.
With the breakup of the Soviet Union, Hasidim are now able to return to the resting places of their early leaders. Here, in Vishnitsia, Ukraine, the newly restored grave of the first Rebbe of Vishnitz is being prepared for a special pilgrimage. Today, the largest group of Hasidim since the Holocaust have returned to pray at this holy site.
Rabbiner K. Это проблема Rabbiner K. Rabbiner K.
Where's your loving?
Атаву собирай. After its first century of growth, Hasidism began to lose its hold, especially on the young. The lessons taught in Hasidic schools were seen as increasingly irrelevant to the poverty and anti-Semitism faced by Jews in Eastern Europe. Many young people transferred the spiritual zeal and idealism once invested in religion to their newfound worldviews: Zionism, socialism, and communism.
In the 1920s, the Soviet Union forced nearly all religious life underground. Synagogues were closed, and the parchment of the sacred scrolls was cut up and given to shoemakers to use as leather. In spite of escalating persecution, the Lubavitch Rebbe directed his emissaries, his shlichim, to organize an underground network of religious schools.
There were Hasidim who pleaded with him, let's leave, let's go to Poland, let's go to Palestine. And he said, no, our mission is to be here. God put us here for some reason, and that reason is to perpetuate Judaism in this place.
From the 1920s until today, the emissaries of the Rebbe's of Lubavitch have struggled to preserve Jewish religion and identity in the former Soviet Union. Today, Beryl Lazar and his wife Chani have come to Russia to train a new generation of shlichim. In 1929, the Lubavitch Rebbe traveled to the United States to raise funds for his underground schools. His American followers begged him to settle here. The Rebbe said, "America is not yet ready for Hasidism. Here," he said, "even rabbis have compromised and shaved their beards." The Rebbe returned to Eastern Europe, where he remained until the beginning of World War II.
For at least a century and a half, the corporate mind of East European Jewry was that America is a tchefa de bedina. America is a place which is wild and woolly and open, and everybody does what he wants. There is no authority. There is no settled structure as has existed in Europe for many centuries. And therefore, the rabbinic intelligentsia refused to go. My cousin, the Munkacher Rebbe, thundered against America.
Shabbos Oktober! Oktober, Teuses Vermeders, Shabbos sucht eine. So hat ich kein Digma. So gereicht meine Brüder in Amerika. Sollt halten Shabbos, es gibt's auch. Man meint die Shabbos mit den Davonen, nichts tun im Shabbos, es kommt halten Shabbos.
In 1933, the year the Munkach Rebbe scolded American Jews, the Nazi Party rose to power.
As late as even 1939, right before the war, the leading Rav in Lithuania, Chaim Ozer Gradzensky, wrote in a preface to one of his books, "We are in grave danger in our bodies here in Europe, but our souls are in graver danger in American materialism, freedom, license, etc."
For the Jews who remained in Eastern Europe, World War II brought complete devastation and the death of 6 million. Among the Hasidim, 4 out of 5 were killed. Hasidism's teaching that God could be found all around us faced its test during the Holocaust. Some Hasidim continued to cling to a God who had seemingly abandoned them. Others could no longer do so.
Ay zaydi meilitzini heilitzini at meyoy mitoy raskhulaynati yesi ay yavay mitoy raskhulaynati yesi.
Before I went to the concentration camp, my mother packed for me something when they took me away from home, and she put in my siddur there. And that was my prayer book all through my 3 years in camp, in concentration camp. And some of the girls were laughing at me because they already got so bitter and disgusted with the whole life that they said, how can you do it? You know, like, they didn't believe at all. And I still, even if they shut off the light at 10 o'clock at night, I went into the hallway where was a light bulb, and I said it standing up before I went to sleep. And that kept me going.
Back of my mind, I still am rebelling. Why this happens to us. When I say to us, I mean to the Jewish people. And so forth. And therefore, I was at one time pretty far removed from Hasidism, just the same as I was trying to remove myself from Judaism.
This is my mama. This is Schwester and brother Rachel and Moses. Moshe and Rachel.
After the war, my father forgot completely about Judaism. Take example, Shabbos. He completely forgot that the 7th day was Shabbos. That's how he said it. It was like natural. He just walked out of the concentration camp and no yam, nothing. He said I myself can't even understand how someone could completely forget. But it looks like with such a pain, and from the Holocaust you could forget completely your past.
After the war, there was definitely a great pain and most of all anger. People felt that nobody knows who they are, from where they came, what their families were all about. And the anger, the only element which remained stable was God. And the anger was directed against God.
"150 years before the Holocaust, the Rebbe of Berdichev taught Hasidim that God could be found even in anger. The Rebbe of Berdichev asked a tailor how he sought God's forgiveness on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The tailor replied, "I told God, you wish me to repent of my sins, but I have committed only a few minor offenses. But you, O Lord, have committed grievous sins. You have taken away babies from their mothers, and mothers from their babies. Let's call it even. If you forgive me, I will forgive you." Said the Rebbe of Berdichev, Why did you let God off so easily? With that argument, you could have forced him to redeem all of Israel.
The first survivors arrived in New York Harbor on the Marine Flasher in 1946. Most refugees from Hasidic backgrounds had not resumed wearing their pre-war Hasidic clothes and were indistinguishable from other refugees. Many were still struggling with a post-Holocaust crisis of faith, uncertain whether or not to resume Hasidism in America.
When I came to this country and my wife started giving me, thank God, kids, and I started realizing, well, where am I going to go from here? What am I going to do with those kids? How am I going to bring them up? Am I bringing them up non-believers, atheists? It wouldn't help. Am I bringing them up as God forbid, converts? It wouldn't help, because Hitler took 2-3 generation converts and threw them into the gas chambers. And I bring him up as regular Americans, non-believers, or whatever. What is going to happen? I'm not going to take away so many generations before me with fathers and grandfathers and so forth and throw it out.
Among the survivors were a handful of Hasidic leaders, including the Rebbes of Kloisenberg, Skver, Satmar, and Bobov.
The Rebbe of Bobov went through the Holocaust, lost his wife, survived with a son, understood exactly the crisis of faith which people experienced.
Op de eerste arm, had me zeker gevallen. En dat ik weet waar je gaat, dat mag ik uit de kent mama besproken, de ganze besproken van hem, zijn taten en mama, en zei dat jeder hem gekend. Dat me zei waar ik ben, wann der Stamm, en die alle Sachen, also so wissen, dass ich bin von Heim, jedes Kind, ein Hasidisch Kind, und sah bei ihm, einfach zick werden, dass meine Eltern sind gewesen. Und gewesen wie Tate zu sein. Jeder gekommen, zerbrochen, ohne Families, mit Families, und sie haben gut gehabt, und der Rabbi zu gewiss besorgen mit Dires, Apartments, und auch die Jobs, verschiedene. Und jeder hat, studiere gemacht für jeden einen, und das sehr schwerer Job, das aufzubringen, in so einer kleinen Saal zusammen in Amerika, Hasidisch.
Hasidim were much more fortunate than non-Hasidim. It offered for them a home. They could sit with the Rebbe and speak in Yiddish and tell the stories.
When I go to Brooklyn, as I do fairly often, I always think of the Mayflower, the Amish, I say to myself, these are the urban Puritans. They arrive with what is left alive of their Hasidim because it was no longer possible to live in Eastern Europe. Like the Pilgrims arriving here in the early 1600s. They came not in search of the American dream, but in search of a place where they could do what they had always done in freedom and without being persecuted and without being murdered by Hitler.
And they begin to realize that if they're going to survive not just as individual people, but as a community and as a way of life, they have to create an enclave in which they can take from America, but not become swept up and swallowed by America. And that, I think, begins the essential culture war that is Hasidism and to some extent all Orthodox Judaism.
When the Satmar Rebbe came to America, he saw many empty synagogues and only a few religious schools. He said, "We will do exactly the opposite from these Americanized Jews. We will get by with small synagogues. Instead, we will build big schools with many children learning the Torah."
The adults protect them from the world outside, but they also look to those children for the fire. If the fire is still burning in the eyes and the hearts and the songs and the voices of the children, then you know the future is intact.
The children here in the yeshiva, most of them, are grandchildren of survivors from the concentration camps. They are a little bit different than my generation was. I'm a son of a camp survivor. We try to give our children much more attention, much more time. Some of us felt that our parents, the generation gap between them and us was 2 generations, not 1 generation. We are the first generation who are on the same wavelength as our children.